Дети и молодежь в основном потребляют контент через интернет, а значит, мы все должны понимать, как создавать контент, который не имеет географических границ и должен быть интересным, может быть интересным глобально. Итак, я вам представляю нашего спикера Адам Вудгейт, вице-президент по Media Trends Dubit, 30 лет опыта работы в медиа, маркетинге и исследованиях. Работал в London Weekend Television, работал в США и Великобритании. В 2001 году создавал аудиторию-центричную культуру в качестве главы по исследованиям и инсайтам в IMAP. Работал в Guardian Media Group. После изучал инсайты по детским брендам BBC Worldwide. Сейчас занимается программированием, созданием контента и медиа-исследованиями в Dubit Trends, самом большом трекере по детским медиатрендам, покрывающим 20 стран. Компания работает с издателями, бродкастерами, создателями контента, рекламными агентствами, дает рекомендации по стратегиям с учетом новых трендов.
Hello, Bishkek. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to talk about children and children's media choices. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but it's great to have an opportunity to talk to you and bring you up to date on what's happening in the world of kids. So without further ado, let me talk to you about Dubit, which is the company I work for. I head up research, and Dubit is a UK-based digital agency that specializes in nothing but kids. Once they get to 18, that's it, we say goodbye. But when it comes to kids, that's what we focus on. So we're about research and insights, understanding the audience, understanding this dynamic and exciting young audience who are always into the latest stuff, helping businesses, content makers, media owners, publishers, understand young audiences and work out ways to reach them. And then we also have a digital studio where we build digital experiences for kids. These could be games or just broader experiences. We're now working a lot with the metaverse. It's the buzzword of 2022, but we've built a number of experiences for kids and families in the metaverse. We also make apps. We do a lot of educational products, and we're also at the forefront of technology with VR and AR products. Now, let me tell you a bit about the research that we do. We have a global tracker of kids in 20 countries around the world. We research every April and every October, and with parents' permission, we send a survey to 16,000 children a year to understand what devices and technology they're using, what they're doing on the devices that they have, what brands and content they engage with, and we'll focus on some of that during this talk. And then how they find out about content, because there's so much stuff out there. One of the biggest problems is finding new content, finding content they want to engage with. So how do they find that out? We'll explain in a little bit. It's representative of national audience profiles, and we capture ethnic background, household income, where they live. So our survey is very representative of the audiences that we're talking to. If the survey is completed by a 2 to 7 year old, then we ask that the parents answer the survey, but with their child as close at hand as possible. And if the child is 8 and above, well, they're quite capable of answering the survey on their own. As I say, the survey is conducted every April and every October, and we have the latest data in here, so you'll be seeing numbers that are very, very relevant right now. I should say our focus is we're going to focus, lean our data to Asian markets, and you'll see that with Chinese, Indian, Malaysian, Australasian data, but we'll give some context, maybe adding in Germany and the US from time to time, just to give you a balance of what is going on in the different marketplaces. Plus, we've also got some aggregated global data. So we've taken all 20 markets, aggregated the data where we think it's relevant. So you'll see that with the little symbol of the globe that was on the bottom right corner of the last slide. Okay, let's run through what we're doing today. We're going to talk about entertainment choices from a kid's perspective. The second thing, we're going to look at how kids use screens and what they use them for. Because when you think about it, typically in many countries, kids have got access to more than one screen. So why would they not just stick at one screen? Well, I'll explain. More activities on more screens means more time is spent on screens, and we'll see just how much time kids are spending on screens and how they're balancing the time within their screen use. Which brands are kids most passionate about? There's so many brands to choose from across toys, games, movies, books, films, entertainment, so much to choose from. But which are the brands that kids are going to really be most passionate about, and what influences those choices when kids choose a brand to engage with. And then finally, that problem of discovery, how kids find out about brands. Then I'll wrap it up with the takeaways, and then we've got the question and answer session. Okay, so let's get started. Looking at entertainment choices from a kid's perspective. So once upon a time, choice was so simple, wasn't it? You had comics and kids magazines, you had the radio, you had the television. It was really, really simple. When I grew up in the UK, we had 3 TV channels, we had 4 radio stations, we didn't have video games consoles, we didn't have video recorders, we had a very simple choice of medium. And then what happened? Well, everything exploded. Starting in the 70s, if you remember, the games consoles came into being, then VHS video recorders, then we got DVDs. Oh, goodness, it all exploded. And then we got the internet. Google arrived in 1996. We started getting the first iPhone in 2003. The iPad was launched in 2010. And all these brands have come into the world ever since. We've got YouTube, we've got, brands like Netflix that were once sending videos through the post to people's homes, and now people just click online and get whatever they want, whenever they want it. There is so much to choose from. In fact, it's like standing in the supermarket looking at the shelves of jam. You want strawberry jam, you want apricot jam, you want raspberry jam. How do you choose? What do you choose? What's different to one another? What makes a kid, make a particular choice for this piece of content as opposed to that piece of content at any one time? And the problem is, when it comes to making choices, that you just have this absolute, rabbit in headlights situation, which is you have all this to choose from, but what do you choose? And this is John Landgraf, who was the CEO of FX Networks, and he said very simply, and this is true for all consumers, whether you're in the supermarket or you're a kid, choosing something to engage with at any one time. The moment you make a choice, you've unchosen everything else you could choose from, and you're making an investment in what you've chosen. So in other words, when you buy products in the supermarket, like a jar of jam, you're hoping that will be the best jam. It'll taste great. It'll be full of fruit. You'll really enjoy it when you spread it on your toast. A kid, exactly the same. When they choose to engage with something, whether that's a TV show, a movie, read a book, play with an app, they want that to be the best experience. And if it's not, they go, goodness, I could have chosen something else and I might have enjoyed that. And we'll explain how this thinking is evolving their choices that they make. Now, when we look at a kid's life, and this is true practically every country around the world, kids sleep for about 8 hours a day, or we hope they do. They're at school, many of them from school age, for around 7 hours a day. They have homework and assignments that takes up roughly an hour a night. They spend probably an hour eating, and they've maybe got another hour of activities that are arranged, whether that's going to, say, scouts, or it's playing football with a local, football club or whatever. They've got something in their life. So that 6 hours that's left in any one day is what every entertainment company that's out there right now is trying to get a share of. They're trying to get some eyeballs moving in their direction and getting that little share of their share of that 6 hours. And this is a quote from Reed Hastings, who's the CEO of Netflix. And this is because in a kid's world, there isn't TV time, there isn't game time, there isn't toy time. Everything is in competition for everything else. And any parent knows you can never quite predict whether a kid's going to say they want to get their toy box out, or they want to watch a film, or they want to see Scooby-Doo on television, or they want to play with an app. You never know. And Netflix, and any media company now is up against it. And the big game brands are absolutely huge, whether it's Fortnite, Minecraft, or Roblox. They are eating into kids' share of available screen time. And this is why Reed Hastings made this comment that generally Netflix will lose to a brand like Fortnite. So when you're thinking about building content, creating content, making something for a kid's audience, a young audience, think about what doesn't change. This is a great quote from Jeff Bezos, who was CEO of Amazon. The question everybody says is, what's going to change in the next 10 years? Now, things do change. Of course they change. We've just been through a COVID pandemic that no one 3 years ago would have ever predicted. But as I will show you in a minute, humans are very resilient, and they're also, like the behaviors that they've come to love in their lives. So whilst COVID changed things, there is now a regrouping back to where kids were pre-COVID. So when we look at what Bezos is saying here, we need to think about what doesn't change in kids' lives. So if you think about it, technology has changed. We've gone from, that picture that I presented at the start of this presentation of a stack of magazines, a very old-fashioned looking radio, a very old-fashioned cathode ray tube TV, to look at what we've got now. 60-inch TVs, we've got, the PC in your pocket, which is your smartphone. We've got tablets, we've got PC laptops, we've got games consoles, we've got smart speakers, we've got wearable devices, we've got a ton of technology. But underlying all of that, all those things do is give audiences, and in particular kids, new ways to get to the things that they want to do. At the end of the day, a movie is still a movie, a toy is still a toy. They might mesh things together, but the thing is, behaviors and child development stays the same. A child can only do certain things at certain ages, and that's kind of never changed. There is a point in a life where a child develops the motor skills to be able to operate a trackpad on a laptop or a remote control. There's a phase in a life where a child becomes able to hypothesize. So you can say, imagine what would the world be like in 30 years' time? A child of a certain age can't do that. They need materials, they need stimulus. But a teenager, they can figure that stuff out. And that's what doesn't change. Child development doesn't change. What does change, though, is what kids do with the toys and games and entertainment and media that they've got. They will mesh stuff together in ways that brand manufacturers and content creators could have never imagined. They will, and we've seen this when we've gone into home, they'll create tea parties. We've seen 4-year-old girls create tea parties in their own homes with Barbie dolls, action men, cuddly toys, and playing the music from Paw Patrol, because that's what they want to do. They want to have a tea party with their characters. And who's going to tell a kid that those brands don't live together? Brand managers won't like it, but kids want to play with the things that they've got however they want it. So not only does everything compete with everything in media, so in other words, games, apps, toys, TV shows, films, books, music, all compete for time, all compete for that 6 hours. In a kid's mind, everything also connects with everything. So in other words, Paw Patrol can quite happily live with Batman or Captain America or Peppa Pig. They can all live together in a child's world because it's an omnimedia environment. And so when you're thinking of creating content, you need to think about giving your audience opportunities to play with your material, what you put out there, and maybe do things with it that you could have never conceived. Do things with it in different ways, because I'm sure DC Comics, when they created Batman, never ever thought that it would be meshed with some toy puppies that were created in the last 10 years. And talking of kids, so this is our global data. You can see in the top right-hand corner there, the little global symbol. So look out for that and you'll know it's always global data. So what things do kids like to do and how different are kids? So in this data in the presentation, I've kind of split kids roughly up to the time they go to school and kids roughly at school age. Now, these boundaries I know vary by country. You know, in the UK, we start school you know, around 4.5, 5. I know in some countries it's nearer 6, but it gives you kind of a split of what kids like to do. So on the left-hand side, let's look at what those school children up to school age like to do. Love going out, spending time with family, you know, and that's family activities. It could be going just out for the day, having a picnic, just spending time together. Family is so important. And you see that that's true with older kids as well. But then when you look at the younger ones, they love playing with toys and games. That's the top activity. But watching video content online, so that includes things like YouTube or Youku in China, is in third place. Watching TV shows made for kids on streaming services like Netflix, Disney Plus, that's in 4th place. And then that social element that kids have so missed during COVID, which is actually being with their friends. 3/5 of kids say those are activities I like. So you can see the top 5 there. If we flip over to the right-hand side, some similarities, some difference. Going out with family, spending time with family, still the most important activity they do. The video content being watched online, that jumps up 5 percentage points. Listening to music comes in. Teenagers, music and audio is huge with teens. Why is that? Well, music defines people, you know, from an early age of nursery rhymes and sing-alongs through, you know, those middle years, middle grades, as they would say in America, where, you know, music is all about the songs from the shows and the movies that they watch, to when kids become tweens and they start to find artists and bands and groups that really their music resonates, touches them, is who they are and what they are. So that's why music comes into play so much more than with the younger kids. Then socializing is huge. And then we get app games coming in. So, you know, playing casual games, playing games on mobile, on tablet, you know, more than 3/5 of kids saying that they like that. So you can see, whilst kids are similar, there's differences, subtle differences by ages. So we know what kids are faced with, masses of choice. We know that what kids like to do. How does that play into what they do? So let's have a look at the screens around the world. So let's have a look at 2 to 7s first. So you've got many of the countries that we research with trends here, and you can see generally the biggest screen that kids own, and the percentage is the percentage of kids who have one of their own. And this is aggregated for, you know, it's representative of the global audiences. So, you know, this is weighted to the population. So you can see the tablet is the biggest device generally. There are exceptions. You'll notice in France, actually, portable game consoles, nudge it. And in Malaysia, it's the smartphone. But generally, you can see the tablet is likely to be the device that kids of 2 to 7 have ownership of. And when I say ownership, it might not have been bought for them. It might have been handed down to them, but they're primarily in control. But you can see the numbers vary depending on the country. So if you look at the US, if you look at the UK, it's over half of kids have one of their own. But if you look at some other countries, if you take India, down to 7%. So you can see it does vary. Wealth, GDP do influence these factors. And of course, many kids in places like India and Brazil and Malaysia and China and you know, Mexico are not having their own devices, but they've got devices in the house that they can use. And what do they do on those screens? Remember, I said every screen has its purpose. So the top activity for the younger children on a tablet is playing app games. Then they'll watch YouTube, or in China, Youku, watching a subscription on demand service. So that's like a Netflix or a Disney Plus. Using educational learning apps. Well, you'd kind of expect that with younger audiences. And then using an entertainment app. Now, an entertainment app is what you might call an app that has multiple things in it. So it might have stories, music, video, games. It's an entertainment app. It's a container app. What are kids that have a smartphone using a smartphone for? Well, playing app games as well, watching video, watching SVOD. So the top 3 don't change. The proportion of kids who do it drops compared to tablet. Where it does differ is taking photos. I'll explain that in a second. And then education and learning, not surprising. What's all the photos thing? So this is a phenomenon that having cameras on phones, having the ability to take screen grabs, has really come to the fore. And actually, someone's memory of photos is often, especially in a kid space, as likely to be pictures of maybe them with friends or family or doing stuff together as it is screen grabs or screen captures. It becomes a digital scrapbook. So that's what's going on when we say 1/5 of kids are using their smartphone and taking photos. Let's have a look at the older kids. It's pretty much a smartphone world. The moment kids get the smartphone, which is why I call it, and I liken the smartphone really, I think, to effectively a personal computer in your back pocket. You've got all that computing power. You've got your phone, you've got your diary, you've got your contacts, you've got your notes, you've got your social, you've got your messaging, you've got, things to, you can use your apps, all kinds of stuff. And so easy and convenient and portable and connected. So you can see why most of the kids around the world have, a smartphone of their own. The interesting one there is Spain, where actually the device that 8 to 15s are most likely to own is actually a games console. But everywhere else, it is the smartphone. And what are they doing on their devices? So if they've still got a tablet and they're still using it, again, it's app games and watching YouTube. But then look what comes in third place. They're now at school. So they've got to complete those schoolwork, homework exercises, those assignments that their teachers have given them. So they're doing that, more than 1/3 are doing that globally online. They're browsing the internet. The internet is their access to everything they want. If they need to find out about sharks or time for a movie, it's all available. So they're using their tablets for that. And they're also still watching SVOD. But let's zoom over to the smartphone where, we know more kids are using these. So the top activity, playing app games, casual mobile games, and we'll see which of the top brands that they're using in a short while. But and in second place, more than half are taking photos or using their phone to capture those moments. And don't forget, this is a social audience now. They want to capture those moments. They want to do a screen grab of when they're the last man standing or the last person standing in Fortnite. They want to capture that moment maybe when their team won the trophy or when they're out with friends. So, using their phone to capture those moments, whether that's a photo or a screen grab, really important. Browsing the internet, that comes in third place. But then they're communicating all the time. They're using WeChat, they're using Facebook Messenger, they're using WhatsApp. They're staying in touch with their friends all the time. And they've gone beyond that. They now use Discord servers. They use Snapchat to send and receive messages. These are the kids who are connected, the connected kids. And they really do want to stay in touch with their friends. Even though they may have just left school, they've got something to talk about, something to share, something to say, and then they watch YouTube videos. So those are the top 5 things that these older kids are doing on their tablets and their smartphones. So they're doing more stuff. We can see that with the percentage scores. They're using screens. Screens are becoming part of their lives, whether their own screens or they're a screen that they have access to, which is maybe mom or dad's, and they use them. They're using their technology, but how long are they using it for? So this is the change in the amount of time spent doing different activities. And again, it's split by the 2 ages. So this is the increase between 2019 and 2021. If the arrow points up, it's going up, arrow down, it's going down. So you can see, and we've got 5 countries here, because these are the countries that we were measuring pre-pandemic, and we measured in our survey last October. So if we look at China, we can see that the amount of time spent playing games has gone up, and this is significant, gone up 15% for 2 to 7-year-olds, 17% for the older kids. In India, the amount of time spent playing games up 11% for younger kids, and then up 25% for those 8 to 15-year-olds. In Brazil, they were always big gamers. And actually, we've seen a dip of 10% with the younger kids and a marginal, very little change really for the older kids. Germany, which has always been a market which has been very reticent with younger kids to be on devices, you can see a massive 45% growth in those 2 to 7-year-olds using screens for playing games. As kids couldn't play in the park, they couldn't play with friends, so digital came to the rescue for them. And for those 8 to 15-year-olds who already were doing a lot of gaming, a significant increase of 8%. Younger kids in America, like Germany, spending more time playing games, 42% increase in the amount of time spent playing games. And even those older kids in a country where there's a lot of consumption of entertainment on screens, still finding time to spend 14% more time playing games on screens. Now we're looking at watching video. What's changed there? And video, as we'll see, is huge in kids' lives. 10% increase in both audiences in China. In India, huge growth there in video being consumed across both ages. The same is true in Brazil. In Germany, younger children, again, the audience that, typically was kept away really from media, really big growth, significant growth, up 48% compared to 2 years ago. Negligible change there for the 8 to 15-year-olds. And in America and the US, 63% growth in video and 41% increase in with the older kids. What's driving this? Well, availability of new services. So if we look, coming into the market has been Disney Plus, which has been a sea changer. Netflix's continued investment around the world in making content, that's driven this, but also a reversion to linear as schools closed and places closed because of COVID. The screen became the source of entertainment. We saw a 15% increase in the amount of first-run movies being consumed on transactional video on demand, which is where it's like a pay-per-view situation. So, you're seeing growth in screen for video, huge growth in screen for video. What about education and learning? And more so, you'll notice in really affecting those younger kids, as those younger kids maybe couldn't go to nursery, kindergarten, preschool, in many countries, more online learning, you see it's moving up and down, but particularly some big online learning growth there in Germany and China, a big drop in the US. And then an audience that was probably already engaged in education and learning because there, more technology being used in schools, computers used in schools, computers used to complete homework. So less growth there, really, apart from China with those older kids. And then in terms of social and messaging, now you'll notice the 2 to 7-year-olds has disappeared. We don't measure 2 to 7-year-olds in terms of social. We know obviously with COPPA regulations, anyone under 13 shouldn't be on social. That said, they are. Kids are using social media from a relatively early age, but we don't measure it below 7. And if you look at this, generally there's very marginal change down in China with this audience, up 5% in Germany. So just on the cusp of actually being, a figure that, has some significance. But in the US, huge growth in use of social platforms. And that's not just, the ones that are established like Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook. They're going into other social platforms. So they're using Discord, servers, when they're playing games with their friends online together. TikTok has been a huge influence on growth in social media, and in countries that we haven't shown here, like the UK, like France, like Canada, really making big headways in capturing audiences. And I'll explain the TikTok phenomenon when we get to the brands. So you can see, whilst away from the US, social media has not really grown much in terms of its share of time. Certainly in the US, massive growth. And the thing about screen use, and we've got a lot of countries here, you can see, so down the side, The red with the triangle, that's video. Below that, games, and below that, learning. So you can see what this table shows. And then you've got Australia, Brazil, China, France, Germany, India, Italy, Malaysia, Spain, UK, US. What I'm wanting to show here is where I've highlighted green, how big video is in terms of the share of time, of screen time that kids spend with video, all north of 50%. So the majority of 2 to 7 year olds' time on screens in Australia, in Brazil, in France, in Italy, in the UK is spent with video. US, just about 50, but not quite. Then if you look at the amount of time kids spend playing games, it's significantly less than video, but it ranges from around 10% of time, and that would be in China, to 18% of the time. So almost a fifth of the time on screens in Brazil, in Italy, in the UK, in the US is spent playing games. And then you've got education and learning with this younger audience. Now, you notice the standouts there: China, 27%, India, 22%, Malaysia, 22%, Spain, 22%. So 4 countries there where education and learning on screens is more than a fifth, and actually in one of them, more than a quarter of the time is spent with education and learning. Parents in those countries see the value of screens for learning. I mean, parents in many countries now see the value of screens. It's not just that screens are just this throwaway thing. It's just for frivolous entertainment. You know, there is a value of screens. When we look at the older kids, things do change. Social comes into their world. And you notice on the top there, if we look at video, none of those countries hit more than 50%. In fact, there's only one, which is France, that gets to 40% of the time on screen is spent with video. It's typically around a third, but in Germany and China, it's lower. It's between a fifth and a quarter. Same in Spain. UK, US, just north of a third. But you can see older kids are doing more stuff on their screens. Younger kids are more controlled. So therefore, they tend to be focused on what their parents are introducing them to. So think about that when you're making content. If you're making it for a preschool audience, it's parent-driven, parent-led, and parents will put kids in places that they feel their kids are safe, they feel the content is good, nutritious, and when I say nutritious, it has everything from soft learnings to harder learnings, and it's got light and shade. In other words, it's not just cartoons, it's not just action and adventure, it's a mix of everything. When we look at older kids who have more control and more influence about their media, you can see that video drops because they're doing other things on their screens. You'll notice with games, it's dipped a little bit, but not much. You know, it's still taking somewhere between, you know, maybe, China's a low, but, you know, somewhere between 12 and 18% of kids' time on screens. Now, if we look at education and learning, we can see that still in China, still in Malaysia, still in Spain, you know, a fifth or more is spent with education and learning. But in other countries, it's somewhere between, you know, around 13, 14% of the time is spent on screens. In actual fact, if you look at Germany and India, it goes up to 18%. But then if we add in social, which is at the bottom there, you can see how much time is spent on social. Now you've got France, which is the outlier there. Now France is a really interesting country because it's very traditional in its media, very family-centric, and technology plays a second to the family. In France, there's still huge linear audiences. So linear TV, Gulli, which is the big kids channel in France, still delivers huge audiences. So you'll have noticed when I've been showing this, that actually the share of time in France tends to be lower on digital, and you'll notice that it's higher for video. So this is about the way French parents encourage their kids to consume the entertainment that they consume. But you can see elsewhere, you know, a fairly large chunk of their time on screens is spent on social. So whether that's TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, they're on social. This chart is the UK and US. And the reason I'm showing the UK and the US here is because of, I want to show how the pandemic influenced screen behaviors. And I purposely chose the UK and the US because the UK came out of all the COVID lockdowns sort of by June of last year. So if we look left to right, we can see October 2019, pre-pandemic, April 2020, the UK had just kind of gone into its first lockdown. And then you had October, things had loosened up, but there were still pretty severe restrictions. April last year, again, we were in a 3-month lockdown. But then by June, as I said, we'd come out of lockdown, and certainly by October, there were no restrictions. Now, the US was slightly delayed in all of that. It was still last October, many states within the United States was still had COVID restrictions on behaviors. What I'm trying to say is if you look from October 2019 to October 2021, we had that big uplift in screen use. So you've got the 4 screens that kids have access to: the television, the tablet, the smartphone, the PC, laptop. So there was that huge uplift in viewing and use of those screens. But by the time people are out of the COVID restrictions, where those blue, red, green, and amber lines are is pretty much back to where they were. In fact, they're a little bit lower to some extent, but they're pretty much back to where they were in October 19. In other words, people turned to screens during the pandemic, but they came away and reverted to a normal pattern, which is going out, being with friends, playing with friends, doing stuff together, clubs and societies back open, sports back open. So you can see the screen was there, came to the rescue, but there was the evidence there of the reversion to pre-COVID behaviors. Now in the US, it's slightly different. You can see their pre-pandemic patterns, October 2019, huge growth in screen use, and then that continued, and it continued growing right up until April 2021. And whilst the tablet and the PC laptop have declined, and that's much because schools reopened, many schools were fully reopened by September 2021. There were still restrictions on movie theaters not necessarily being open, theme parks not necessarily being open, attractions not necessarily being open, advice on not mixing of families. So you can see at the other extreme, the smartphone use stayed high as people use smartphone or kids use smartphones to stay in touch through messaging, social networks, and TV stayed high as the TV became the screen to consume movies on, first run movies, and pay per view, that kind of content. What we'll see in our latest data when it comes out for April 2022 is whether the US has followed the UK's pattern or the US has gone its own way. We don't know that yet, but that's what's happening in terms of screen use, and that's why I've shared that. So so far we've seen the devices that the kids have, what they're doing on those devices. We're seeing the amount of time they're spending doing stuff, what the change has been in terms of playing more games, watching more video, more engaged with social. We've also seen, and remember it, that everything in a kid's life competes with everything else, and kids think, and everything is interchangeable with everything else, and the kids can mash stuff together in ways that brand owners and content creators never ever imagined. But what are the brands that kids are most passionate about? Okay, so I have got the top 10 brands, so that's across the top 1 to 10. So the left-hand side are the most popular brands, the right-hand side are popular brands, but they're not as popular as the ones on the left. We've got 5 countries. We've got China, India, Malaysia, Germany, and the US, just for reference. Now, at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that there is a color dots. So this is where that brand originated. So purple for toys, orange for film, blue for television, green for online, and that would be generally games, but online could be a games console or something like that. Now, what you need to look at, the reason we do the color coding is look at the intensity of the colors. You see quite a bit of purple, quite a bit of blue, and quite a bit of green. And so as we look at those countries, so whether it's, China with Lego as the top brand, the second biggest brand is Anipop, Peppa Pig third, Ultraman fourth, you can see that, you can work out where they originate. So if you look at China, so, you've got 5 of the top 10 brands originating in television. You've got 2 online, you've got 2 as toy, 3 as toy, I beg your pardon, 3 as toy. If you take India, you can work out the pattern. You've got Doraemon, you've got Candy Crush. So you've got 5 brands originating in TV. As the top, you've got 4 online. And you can look at that across. Take Germany, it's 3 toys, it's 3 TV shows, it's a movie brand, a couple of game brands. So you can see at this age, their media is coming from lots of sources, but heritage with toys like Lego and Barbie, established TV shows like Tom and Jerry, SpongeBob, preschool, made for preschool shows like Paw Patrol and Peppa Pig, and then local content made for those localized markets, like Ultraman, like Descendant Mickey Mouse in Germany. Local brands are competing with the global brands. So in certain markets, localization. So you can see the combination of what kids are enjoying, but you can see as well all the brands that they're most passionate about. These are the brands that kids love, the top 10. When we look at the older kids, we've now got a new color, which is the pink, which is social. So these brands originate in social. And you can see on the left-hand side, Lego's been deposed by WeChat and WhatsApp. You can also see, Telegram in there. You can see TikTok in there. You can see Snapchat and Facebook in there. But what you'll notice is the blue is the color that seems to have disappeared the most. You can see that green is the color that seems to have kind of replaced the blue. So much more of the brands that this age group are engaging with have originated online. So, when we first started Trends in 2015, blue would still be pretty, dominant on this slide as well. However, there's been a lot of change in the last 3 or 4 years, and brands originating in the digital space, and probably the best evidence of that is a brand like Fortnite, which only came into being 2017-18. And then you've got PUBG, Player Unknown Battleground. You can also see that there, Free Fire. All those brands have come into being post sort of 2017, 2018, and they've become pretty dominant in kids' life, and they've been big enough to push SpongeBob away. They've been big enough to push Tom and Jerry away and these other heritage brands. And this is the thing. So this table here shows the number of brands that kids mention, not know of. This is not kids ticking boxes that we've given lists of. This is kids typing away on their keyboard when they're answering the survey, or their parents typing what their kids are telling them if they're younger children. And this is the number of brands that kids know. So think back to that slide with the jam. This is the problem. So think of these numbers as jars of jam. Huge numbers, isn't it? You look at China, 141 apps kids mentioned, 198 TV shows mentioned by 8 to 15 years. In a country like India, 132 films named, take by older kids. You can look at any of these numbers and they're huge. You go to the US, everything, number of TV shows, 214 mentioned, different shows mentioned by parents with 2 to 7-year-olds. So the numbers of brands, the number of jars on those shelves that kids are choosing is absolutely huge numbers. And then you're coming along trying to create a new piece of content to force your way into this marketplace. And this is the problem. So this is what we call the fat head on the left-hand side and the long tail. And all that gray at the bottom of the screen, above where it says mainstream and passion, is those brands that kids have named or their parents have named that the kids have told them to name. On the left-hand side, you've got the huge brands, the big brands, the Legos, the Disneys, the Paw Patrols, the Peppa Pigs, those brands like that, the Minecrafts, the Robloxes, the Fortnites. On the right-hand side, you've got a mixture of new brands, emerging brands. Fortnite used to be on the right-hand side when it first came out. And then you've got the brands that kids are really passionate for. That could be Crunchyroll, the online streaming service that has real loyalty of its fan base, but doesn't have many fans because it's a real niche product. And then in the middle, you've got that mainstream. It's not really in the middle of the chart, it's to the left of the chart, but that's where you've got lots of brands exist like Scooby and SpongeBob and emerging brands, brands like Angry Birds and brands like that. They sit there. And this is all about how you get your content to market. So on the left-hand side with blockbusters, you've got huge resources, huge marketing budgets, huge distribution platforms, no problem, you can reach your market. On the right-hand side, you've got passion. This is where the passion is. This is the kids who have found a place to find out about sharks or space or something that they're really into. And they're going to talk about those brands and places and products to their friends. So they're going to generate conversation by word of mouth. But the mainstream is the struggle. They used to be the bread and butter of linear TV. Linear TV would put their shows out once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, whatever. But now they haven't got the budgets to get into the blockbusters. They're not niche enough to be the passion brands. They're sitting there squeezed. So they've got to get their brands to market. They've got to be considered by kids. They're one of those jam jars on that shelf. And how do they find their way to the audience? And remember, all those brands that you've just seen on that last slide have to be better than Lego, have to beat SpongeBob, have to beat Roblox, because kids only have a few brands that they absolutely are really passionate about at any one point in time. Those tastes and passions change as they get older. At a young age, they're going to be into Paw Patrol, but a 10-year-old isn't going to be into Paw Patrol. They're going to be moved on to Minecraft or Roblox or Fortnite. And they're going to be, they're going to have a different set of brands, but they're still only going to have a finite number of brands that they are really passionate about. And that's the thinking that you've got to do, because when you're creating new brands or new content for kids, whether it's a TV show, whether it's a book, a game, an app, you've got to bump one of these brands out of that small list of brands that any kid loves at any stage in their life. And how do you do that? What is it that influences kids' content choices? What is it that makes them pick Roblox over SpongeBob over Lego? If anyone's heard of the Maslow hierarchy of needs, this is our sort of Maslow-ish sort of hierarchy of kids' media. This is what a kid kind of goes through in their thinking, even if they don't actually think it literally. This is what they go through in their thinking. So first thing is, what devices can I use? Secondly, how much time do I have? So because they may only have 10 minutes, they might have an hour. So, and that will influence. What job does the content need to fulfill? Do they want to be entertained? Do they want a lean back experience? Do they want a sit forward experience? Sit forward, they're going to be part of it. Lean back, they're just going to soak it up. Do they want a favorite? Do they want to seek something new? Can they discover it? Can they find it if it is something new? Do their parents subscribe? Or is it on a service that they don't have in their home? And at the top of the pyramid, will mum or dad let me watch it? So we have this model of emotional scheduling, which is basically that those factors feed into kids' thinking at any one time. So what the setting is, i.e. where they are, what the time of day is, what the amount of time is, what devices they have, what mood they're in, what job they need their content to do. And typically behaviors like this. So in the morning, when the sun's coming up, they're getting ready for school or daycare. Staying out of the way. Mum or dad is getting ready for work, and even in a work from home environment. Remember, even in developed places like the UK and US, 60% of people cannot work from home because they're driving a bus, flying a plane, they're in a factory, on a production line. They can't do that remotely. So, parents are busy first thing in the morning. So staying out of the way is really important. Linear TV is great. Kids don't have to think. They don't have time. They've got to have their breakfast, get ready for school. So they don't have time to go searching through Netflix for their favorite show. They just want to put something on, watch it while they eat their breakfast. Older kids may be on their devices checking their social feeds and stuff, but generally, the majority of kids it's a very structured time of day. towards the end of the day, we call it the Bermuda Triangle of media. They've been under someone else's control. So all of a sudden, all their media goes back on. If school said no devices in school, then all of a sudden, the moment they come out of school, everything's on. Catching up, what's been on the TikTok feed, what kids said on, mates have said on WhatsApp, what's the latest, what's new in the App Store, what's on YouTube. It's just a media explosion. But not only that, they're with their friends in person or online. They're also checking their social feeds. They may be going to after school activities or sports or something. So it's a busy time. And then as we get to the evening, their mood changes again. It's family TV time, maybe watching shiny floor shows or the big reveal shows like Bake Off, MasterChef. Younger kids are probably coming off devices and reading a book or reading with a parent or an older sibling. Older kids are going to quiet spaces, maybe watching a long-form YouTube video about how to complete a level in a video game. Girls may be listening to their favorite bands, on Spotify or Apple Music. And then the technology comes away and kids wind down as they get to bedtime, and actually the physical media takes place. So you can see that is a summary of this. This is the global picture typically of days. You see in the morning, the light bluish line is linear TV, which is dominant. Then they're in school, or some of the kids, it can, depending on what time of day the school begins and ends. That's why we've got, but everything is compressed. And then all of a sudden, when it sort of hits 2 o'clock, school's out. You've got that grey area, which is what we call the Bermuda Triangle of media. And then TV takes the lead again as the family comes together to watch family time TV. And then at the end of the day, evening reading takes over. So we kind of know the moods, the needs, what jobs the content needs to be done. When it comes to an individual piece of content, what drives choices? You see, one of the most important things is mum or dad has to give you the sign off. If they don't give the sign off, it's no good. So edgy content is always something that's going to give parents concern, but they'll audition it maybe in advance if the kid's asked to see it, and they'll ask other parents whether it's suitable for their equivalent age kids, but parents have still got to sign it off. But beyond the parent, the hygiene factor of parents signing it off, what else does it need? Well, for both younger and older kids, it needs to have great characters. For younger kids especially, it needs to stimulate the imagination. Kids have to trust and understand it. So I always remember talking to a 7-year-old who used to watch Shark Week on Discovery, didn't understand the language because it was made for adults. So whilst absolute fan of sharks, obsessed with sharks, all the different sharks around the world and how different sharks were and where they lived and which part of the ocean they lived in, he didn't understand the language all the time and kept saying, why can't they do a Shark Week for kids? So making sure they understand it, making sure they trust it, really important. And then when you look at older kids, storyline and narrative important, convenience is important, and younger kids too, they want to learn something from it. So when you're building content, those are the motivations that drive those content choices. And when it comes to formatics, what kind of format should you be making your content in? Well, younger children, the majority prefer animation over live action. But what that doesn't mean is live action doesn't work for younger kids. Of course it does. It just means their preferences for animation. When you look at older kids, the biggest thing is they want an equal mix here. And you can see the live action and the animated version of Cinderella on the screen. They want an equal mix of live action and animation. So by all means, for all ages, make animation. By all means, for all ages, make live action, because kids will watch it. It's about great content with great stories, great narrative, great characters, stimulate their imagination, help them learn things if they're younger, help them, find out about things when they get older, satisfy passions, satisfy interests, and you're on your way to making and building an audience. And what themes or genres are they interested in? So, the left-hand one, both kids want to laugh. So building humor into content will always work. Animals and wildlife, puppies, kittens, all that kind of stuff, kids absolutely love. Action and adventure doesn't have to be Bear Grylls. Kids see action and adventure as Scooby-Doo, they see it as Paw Patrol, so you're winning there. Music, remember how important music is in kids' lives. Sci-fi, fantasy, and I'm not thinking necessarily Star Wars at this age, I'm thinking, PJ Masks, that kind of content really, really works. With the older kids, again, humor, action and adventure, Power Rangers, that kind of content always ticks a box. For older kids, wildlife and animals is more likely to be about sharks and what's happening in the wildlife parks and things like that, rather than maybe puppies and kittens, but they still love animals and wildlife. Music has moved on. It's more about the artists, the bands, concerts. If you think about the number of kids who were watching Travis Scott and Marshmello in Fortnite, when they were streamed around the world, see how big music is. And when it comes to sci-fi fantasy, sure, this is the age where kids are getting into Marvel, DC Comics, The Mandalorian, Star Wars, all that stuff. So you can see the themes are consistent across the ages. The ranking just adjusts, the percentages just adjust. So you can get a really good feeling there of where your content will appeal. But the list goes bigger than this. This is just the top 5. There's more to this. And there's no reason you can't be making shows related to sports, shows related to science and how things work, ones related to lifestyle interests such as fishing or football, or that's a sport, cooking, fashion, all those sort of things. Kids have an interest. These are just the top 5, the biggest ones. And that crux of it, so you've built your new content, you've got your themes right, you've got your format right. How do kids find out about it? And boy, this is the biggest problem that any brand, discoverability is the biggest problem with content, because there is so much content on so many platforms. How do they find it? So again, we color stuff just to make life easy. So purple is games, amber is word of mouth, blue is offline or traditional media, pink is social, green is online. And you can see the intensity. So you can see this is 2 to 7s globally. So the power in these 5 countries rather. So the power of word of mouth, you have to get into that conversation between friends. You have to get, and Fortnite did that so well. To start with, if you wanted to play Fortnite, you had to register, and then you had to wait for that email to come saying you were accepted. So they created that scarcity. They created that demand by saying, if you don't register, you won't get in. Now anyone can get in. But at the start, they created noise with a simple mechanic like that. They created, you create talkability for your brand, create chatter in the playground, because it's a real hotbed of discovery. With parents, have a parent-led conversation. Promote your brand direct to parent on your social platforms. Explain to parents what your brand's about. Give them clips so that they can audition it and know that it's good for their kids. Siblings, older siblings will pass down the content that they've loved, and they will happily watch stuff and talk about stuff because it makes them the big kid, makes them the introducer, gives them sort of, a status which they like. And then you can see, then you see this difference. So in countries like India and Malaysia, social channels are so important, whether it's a YouTuber, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, they're much more important. Whereas if you take somewhere like a Germany or the US, yes, social's in there, but it's much more traditional. TV adverts, trailers are all ways that you discover that content is being discovered. When we look at the older kids, you can see social becomes so much more important. This is why we color code these charts, so you can quickly see where things are moving. So you can see that, in Malaysia, in India, and even in the US now, social, really important channels for discovery. I should point out, you'll see games, 1 in 5 kids discovering new brands and content in games. If you think about Roblox, there's 6,500 Lego games in there. Not one of them made by Lego. These are kids making games about Lego, and it's kind of fandom. And so you can get the feeling of just how powerful and influential games is going to be as a source of discovery, on top of social platforms, on top of YouTube, on top of word of mouth, on top of television, on top of trailers, even flicking through the channels. So I've talked long enough. I've gone through the story of how choice influences kids in terms of what they've got to choose from, how they choose, how much time they're spending on screens, what they're doing on screens, what access to screens they have, which brands they're most passionate about, and then leading into how they find out about stuff. So let's just recap. Everything competes with everything, and everything connects with everything. So in other words, kids see that 6 hours of the day as open time. That's the time they've got to choose to engage with whatever they want to do, toy, TV show, app, game, book, music, whatever. And you've got to get yourself in that time when you're making content. And everything also is interchangeable. They'll mesh brands together. They'll put things together that were never, ever designed to be together. So that's why I say, if you're going to be successful, you need to be a platform for facilitating many usable experiences, not just a single purpose brand. Every device has its purpose. Remember, the bigger the screen, the more social the activity. So in other words, the big screen, family entertainment, high fidelity, high quality experience. The smartphone, small screen, short form. You know, that's why TikTok does well. It's no investment in time. You know, you just flick through the videos till you see the one you like. Mobile games, Candy Crush, Angry Birds, Quick Play. So those are the small screen activities, not really social. As you get bigger, you know, the tablet, education, learning, watching video, and ditto with the PC laptop. That COVID-driven screen use that we saw, the big lift is beginning to wane. They haven't abandoned screens. They're just reverting to the behaviors they had before. You know, digital facilitated kids' entertainment all the way through the pandemic, where people had access to it, and it came to the rescue for many kids. And it's now established as part of their lives. You know, they've dipped into the world of Discord, dipped into the world of Roblox, and they're going to stay there, but they're not going to be there as much as they were when they couldn't do anything else. Many of the favorite brands that kids have are born in digital, and games and experiences really can be that test bed. So you can build stuff in a digital space much cheaper than making a TV show, much cheaper than making a book. And, you know, you can focus your efforts and get quick quality feedback, you know, in a way that 20 years ago was impossible. That end of that long tail that I showed, you know, find that niche, create those passion brands, engage those kids, get them talking about your brand. You might not be the big reach, you might not be the blockbuster, but you'll get a long, loyal audience that will probably stay with you a lot longer than many of those blockbusters do. Thinking of the emotional schedule, kids in a world where everything is on all the time, kids need help scheduling that day. That's why linear won't die. You know, someone has to curate a schedule for them. They have to have a schedule. Even during COVID, where everyone said kids don't have a schedule anymore, they did. They had a schedule. It was driven by parents needing to get on with their lives and kids having to fit into that. So when you're building content, you might not be making something that lasts the whole day. It might be something for mornings, uplifting, pick me up, get me going. Might be something for after school, make me laugh. I've had a miserable day. I've got told off in class. Give me something to chuckle over. So think about that when you're building content. Where does it go? Where does it live? Where would be a perfect time in the day, weekday, weekend? And content discovery is no longer the exclusivity of linear TV. You know, they're discovering content across all kinds of platforms. Makes it hard to build a media plan, but think about that. You know, when you're building content, how are you going to talk? How's it going to be talked about in the playground? If kids can't explain it easily, you know, if kids can't explain it in a few words, it's too complex. It won't get through. It won't establish itself. Fortnite was dead easy to explain. Think back to Apple's first advert for the iPad, 1,000 songs in your pocket. How simple was that to explain? And I'll leave it with that. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate this and look forward to taking your questions and talking more about this subject. Thank you once again.
Thank you for thank you for such an insightful presentation. Yes, it was very useful. У нас есть вопросы здесь, в зале? A few questions from me. Why do you think this information is relevant for our market?
Good afternoon, good evening to you. I think wherever you are, I think this is relevant globally. We're seeing kids are the same the world over. I think I've tried to explain their development is, it progresses the same which country you're in is regardless. What changes is the technology, as I've said. And I think, when you're creating content and thinking about the content you're trying to make, I think there's a number of facets that you need to focus on, which I've tried to pull out and highlight, which is build the content for an audience need, make it available where the kids want it to be available, practically everywhere within what your budget can afford. Try and get a go-to-market strategy that works for your brand. So in other words, that might be a partnership, it might be a direct-to-consumer platform, and I think more importantly than anything, what I've tried to show is build where audience tastes are right now, and build for the fact that they're spending more time on screen. Despite some return to a normal behavior or evidence of return to normal behavior, their screen time is still huge, and there's lots of opportunities to reach them on the screens that they have access to.
Oh, thank you. And another question is like TikTok. Could you please explain us why TikTok became so invasive?
TikTok's amazing, isn't it? And if anyone remembers Vine, which was probably a long predecessor to it, which was short form video, it plays to that point that I was trying to make, which is kids don't have to invest much time in watching TikTok. It's short form video, a lot of user generated content on there. The TikTok app helps kids make content that they can post. And also, if they don't like something, they just flick on to the next thing. It's a very great UI. It's just use your thumb, flick up, move on. So I think the point that what TikTok does for a kid is give them access to a ton of content on themes and passions and interests that they have. And it's all short form, so it's all quick burst content. It's the same as playing Candy Crush or Angry Birds. It's really short, snackable content and really works in a kid's world.
Thank you so much. We have so many questions from our audience. Пожалуйста.
Hello, Adam. Thank you for your presentation. Really, I would like to thank you, and it was really full of information for us. My name is Apargul. I am working as a media consultant, and I would like to ask a question about content. We have in social media one project which named it Late After 3. And nowadays, we are planning to improve awareness of parents, and at the same time, we would like to open content for kids. And do you say us about the luckiest content for children, and why you consider that is luckiest? And could you share with us about your experience about it? Thank you.
So can I just clarify? So is this sort of a question about? So if this is a question about social, the problem with social media is they have to be very careful because of all the global regulations. So 13 is that key age. Anything aimed at under 13s, you need to be having a parent-led conversation. You need to direct all your conversations to a parent and tell the parent, about the content you're making. Promote it, tell the parent all the facets, give them clips, give them excerpts, because you're having a conversation with the parent, and the parent needs to become the one who's advocating it to their child. If it's for over 13s, you can have a direct to teenager kind of conversation. And in that respect, it becomes a little bit easier because you can, evidence what you're doing to them. You can put promos in your feeds to them. You can tease a new series. You can tease a new episode. So it becomes a lot easier. But it's the crux of who, where you're targeting. So as I say, anything for 13 and under has to be parent-led. Anything for 13 and over, you can talk directly to the audience. in terms of using social media to get content to kids, again, it's all about the targeting, but it's a great platform. I think I tried to evidence in the charts towards the end of the presentation just how much content kids are discovering on social media, and because there's stuff out there, it's easily accessible. It's very democratic in its delivery of content. It's kind of open access. You don't need to be a subscriber necessarily to the service. But as I say, please, if it's under 13, you need to have that conversation with the parents, a guardian, an adult. It can't be direct to child. That just breaches guidance and guidelines and safeguarding.
Thank you, Adam. We have another question.
Спасибо большое за презентацию. Меня зовут Танчтык, я являюсь детским психологом. И здесь было очень много интересных данных по поводу подростков, но я не увидел по поводу потребления контента касательно построения взаимоотношений. Мы знаем, что у подростков растет интерес вообще к противоположному полу, к вопросам секса, да, и они ищут, там, не знаю, видео интимного характера, порно, и к сожалению, они как бы не защищены от этого в интернете, например, нежелательного контента в нашей стране. Да? Есть ли какие-то исследования, которые говорят о потреблении именно такого характера информации? Делаете ли вы исследования? Если есть, то было бы очень здорово как-то в этом направлении получить информацию, чтобы формировать потом какую-то программу. Да? Вот, спасибо.
Great question. Thank you. Nice to talk to you. What I know about this space is really interesting. When we survey kids, we ask them a lot about material that may be considered sensitive like this. And we find that children still rely on very traditional sources for this kind of education. So parent-led, teacher-led. They will talk to older siblings as well. We don't tend to find the majority of kids go online in the countries we survey to look for this kind of material and information. They will validate stuff that they've heard, and they may check on stuff, and they may read stuff online, but their primary source is still a trusted adult. In most cases, that's mum, followed by dad, their teachers, and then, as I say, an older sibling. They do know of sources, but we find like less than 1 in 10 children go online to look for that kind of stuff, and certainly go into those spaces that are designed for an over 18 audience. Children generally still, even teens, will still primarily want entertainment, social interaction, conversation with friends over kind of information on sexual education and stuff like that, in our experience. Doesn't mean there aren't kids who do it, but it's a small number.
Thank you, Adam. Another
Thank
question.
you very much.
Следующий.
My question will be in English. Thank you very much for your presentation. I highly appreciated your work experience and research. And I'm an urban planner. And as I observed from your research and from your presentation, you studied and observed 11 countries, 11 states, highly densely populated and wealthy states. But Kyrgyzstan is not so wealthy. And
20 стран.
20, sorry,
Да.
20, sorry. And my question is about how did you divide in your research for urban and rural population, children population? And second question, how did culture and religion influence for content consumption, children content consumption? Thank you very much.
That's a great question. Thank you for it. So the choice of countries that we select for trends ranges from sort of innovator countries, so the United States, where a lot of things originate from, a lot of movies, a lot of content, a lot of technology. But then we also want to gather insights on other countries, so we're not just looking at the highly developed, wealthy part of the world. So we've got 20 countries. We hope to expand in time, but at the moment we're sitting at 20. We mix urban and rural. So, you know, it's very easy to research a country like here in the UK. 94% of the population are connected to the internet, so it's very easy to research them. Much harder if you go to somewhere like India, where you're reliant on reaching audiences, and generally you're talking to an urban population. But what we try to do in countries like India, and when we survey Saudi Arabia, we have to use different methodology. So take Saudi, we go door to door. So we knock on people's doors and do the survey with them, because that's the only way we're going to get a representative response from the population right across the country. India and China, very similar. It's very easy to reach the urban populations in India and Mumbai and New Delhi, and in China and Shanghai and Beijing. But to get a feel for the more rural areas, we have to adapt the methodology to do so. So that's what we do. And so we have that process and then combine the results and present them to you. And everything is weighted, so it's representative of the population, not just, say, the internet population, which would be, unrepresentative. When it comes to culture and religion, huge differences around the world, huge differences. Turkey is a market that I've done a lot of research in, and while lots of cultural and religious aspects make content consumption in Turkey very different to any other countries. And parents, I think I mentioned earlier, like French parents, the family is more important than technology. In Turkey, Turkey's history and social and religious and cultural differences really stand out. And parents really want their kids to embrace that and want to ensure that that gets passed down from them to their children, and in time from their children to their children's children. And so we look out for that. And you will see that in the content. You will have noticed, smattered in those brands, local IP, as I call it, intellectual property, local properties. In China has a number of brands that stand out. They're not global brands, but they're huge in China. India has some brands that are huge in India. Take Ultraman in Malaysia. Keep Running in China is one that comes to mind. If you go to Germany, Descendant with the Mouse, it's been around for years. The Sandman. These are programs that have been in those markets for many years. They've been passed from parent to child, and that goes on. And localization and that importance of recognizing cultural differences in the content you make, so important. You'll have noticed the example I have here is how much Netflix has had to invest in making content locally in countries to not just import programming and dub it or subtitle it from what it makes in the US, but actually make programs locally so that audiences feel as though it's relevant, it's local, and it's relatable to where they're from. So I think, huge importance in recognizing those cultural and religious differences when you're building content. But within that framework, global brands or brands from outside particular markets will work. Look at the success of Masha and the Bear. Started in in Russia and is now one of the biggest global brands for kids, preschool kids. So it is possible for these brands to get around the world.
Thank you, Adam. Последний вопрос, пожалуйста, из-за времени сейчас. Адиль.
My question about civic education. В Японии в каждую неделю проходят ток-шоу, программы специально для тинейджеров, посвященные общественно-политической повестке в стране, что немыслимо в странах Центральной Азии и в Кыргызстане. Поэтому вопрос, с чего надо начинать, чего надо избегать при этих вопросах, когда касательно острых политических тем, которые случились не давно, а которые случились недавно. И не только о внутриполитической повестке, но и о повестке мировой. Спасибо большое.
That is a fabulous question, and one that's really close to my heart from my days of working in TV. I think it's really important that media and entertainment brings kids in and talks to kids about the world around them and what's happening now. I think we've got a generation in Generation Alpha, which is those kids born and from 0 up to 13 years old right now, who are extremely in touch with the world around them. They've just lived through a 2.5-3 year pandemic. They're concerned about issues around climate change. They're concerned about issues around recycling, sustainability. I think, whatever you can do to explain the world around them in their terms and give them a voice, I think is really important. A couple of things. I mean, my background, I've worked for the BBC, and BBC since 1973 has had a program called Newsround, which has made the news understandable for young audiences. During the pandemic, NBC in the US launched Nightly News for Kids, and it runs on YouTube and it runs on their NBC News Now channel. And I think making current events understandable for kids, giving kids a voice, letting them be part of the debate and the discussion is really empowering, and I think it's really important. In our trends research during COVID, one of the things they were really, really wanted to do was understand more about the virus, what was happening, why it affected grandma more than it affected them. And they were searching for information, many of them going to YouTube, many of them going to broadcast media to understand what was going on with this thing that their parents had never lived through and that they were living through. And so I think anything you can do in talk, in news, current affairs for children is really good, and really helpful, and gives them a voice and helps them understand the world around them.
Thank you, Adam. And the final question from me, what do you see the next biggest thing in terms of kids?
I have to say it's the M word, it's the metaverse. Anyone who's heard the phrase the metaverse, which is this frictionless place where kids go online and spend more time socializing, playing, telling stories, reading, interacting, I think is going to be the big thing for the coming decade, really. How it plays out, I don't think will be a vision of anything like the movie Ready Player One. I think it will be much more about kids gaming and entertaining themselves and learning and doing things and transacting and buying skins and so forth. And I think the big question for how the metaverse plays out is how video sits in that. Because video is a lean back activity where I soak stuff up. It's not generally very interactive. Gaming, much more sit forward. Social, much more sit forward. So I think how video plays in the metaverse will be really interesting to watch. But I think that the thing where young people are going to be, and I think kids are going to be building the metaverse, I don't think it's going to be the likes of Facebook or big social media companies. I think it's going to be young people who are going to build this space. I think that's the big thing going forward. And certainly, we're at the start of a big, long journey, and it's all going to be very fun to watch.
Thank you, Adam, for your wonderful presentation and answers. Давайте поблагодарим Адама. It was great.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.